At exactly 8:47 on a Tuesday morning, the front end of a luxury SUV folded like a soda can against six steel bollards that hadn't moved so much as an inch. Steam rolled out from under the hood, coolant spread across the concrete, and the woman behind the wheel exploded out of the driver's seat, screaming loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Her husband came running across the lawn in loafers and a golf shirt, already pointing his finger before he even knew what happened. The funny part was that neither one of them had noticed those bright yellow steel posts sitting there for over an hour. They weren't hidden. They weren't camouflaged. They weren't a trap. They were impossible to miss. Yet somehow, there they were, standing face to face with the consequences of 89 straight days of arrogance. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 43 years old, a disabled Army veteran, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Cedar Ridge, Oklahoma. My house isn't impressive. It's a modest brick ranch built in the 70s with faded shutters, an aging pickup truck in the driveway, and enough repair projects to keep me busy until retirement. I like simple things, quiet mornings, predictable neighbors, a cup of coffee on the porch before work. For years, that's exactly what I had. Then Olivia moved in next door. Now, every neighborhood has one person who believes money magically converts into authority. Olivia happened to be ours. She and her husband purchased the property beside mine 2 years earlier. The original home was torn down within a month and replaced with a giant custom-built mansion that looked completely out of place among the older houses. Massive stone entrance, oversized garage, imported landscaping, luxury vehicles parked everywhere. The entire project seemed designed to announce to everyone around them that they had arrived. At first, I didn't care. People can spend their money however they want. What became my problem started one Monday morning when I walked outside to leave for work and found Olivia's black Range Rover parked directly across my driveway. Not partially across it, completely across it. I couldn't pull out. I couldn't go around it. I couldn't leave. I figured maybe she was unloading groceries or dealing with some emergency. So I waited. 20 minutes later, she finally appeared carrying a small stack of mail. I politely asked if she could avoid blocking my driveway in the future. She smiled and said, "Relax, it's only a few minutes." I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, she did it again. Then again the day after that. By the second week, I started noticing a pattern. Every morning around the same time, she'd pull her SUV sideways near my driveway because she didn't want to walk from her garage to the community mailbox station at the end of the street. The extra walk would have taken maybe 30 seconds. Instead, she chose to block my access entirely. On day 12, I tried another conversation. I stayed calm. I explained that I needed access to my driveway in the mornings. She crossed her arms and told me it was a public street and she could park wherever she wanted. That sentence became her favorite phrase. Every time I complained, every time I asked politely, every time I tried being reasonable, she repeated it. Public street, public street, public street. Meanwhile, I was rearranging my schedule around her selfishness. Some mornings I was late to appointments. Other mornings I sat in my truck, waiting for her to finish checking mail, like I was somehow the inconvenience. What bothered me most wasn't the parking. It was the attitude, the little smirk she'd wear when she saw me waiting. The way she'd slowly walk back to her vehicle while pretending not to notice the line of cars building behind her. This wasn't laziness anymore. This was a power game. By day 25, I realized she enjoyed it. By day 30, I knew she expected me to give up. Then came the letter. I got home from work and found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a formal legal notice from her husband, a personal injury attorney who apparently believed his law degree gave him ownership rights over the neighborhood. The letter accused me of harassment. Harassment. After weeks of being blocked from my own driveway. It warned me to stop confronting his wife and threatened legal action if I continued. I sat at my kitchen table reading it twice, then a third time. Most people would have gotten angry, maybe yelled, maybe marched next door. 10 years in the Army taught me something different. When somebody wants an emotional reaction, don't give them one. Let them keep talking. Let them keep making mistakes. Because the louder someone gets, the less attention they pay to the facts. And facts were exactly what I planned to collect. What Olivia didn't realize was that the driveway she had been using as her personal parking zone was about to become the most expensive shortcut she'd ever taken. And what her lawyer husband didn't realize was that his threat letter would end up being the worst strategic decision either of them made during this entire mess. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me pause the story for a second, because this is where a lot of neighborhood disputes go sideways. Most people assume that whoever talks the loudest or hires a lawyer first automatically wins. That's usually not how it works. According to standard procedure, property disputes are decided by documents, surveys, permits, easements, and recorded boundaries, not opinions. From a legal perspective, Olivia made the same mistake a lot of entitled people make. She confused public access with private control. Just because a road is public doesn't automatically mean every inch of concrete connected to it belongs to everyone. That's why property surveys exist. This is a psychological trap people fall into when they've never been challenged. They start believing repeated behavior somehow creates ownership. After blocking my driveway for nearly 3 months without consequences, Olivia convinced herself she had the right to do it. Her husband made it worse by reinforcing that belief instead of checking the facts first. The lesson here is simple confidence and correctness are not the same thing. And very soon, reality was about to deliver a lesson neither of them would forget. The morning after I received that letter, I didn't walk next door. I didn't argue. I didn't call the police. Instead, I started gathering information. Every time Olivia blocked my driveway, I recorded the date and time. Every Ring camera clip got saved into a separate folder. Every photograph got organized. Every interaction got documented. Weeks passed, and while she thought the legal threat had scared me into submission, I was quietly building a file thick enough to tell the entire story without me saying a word. Around day 60, I hired a licensed survey company. The crew showed up with tripods, measuring equipment, and enough orange marking flags to make the neighborhood look like a construction zone. Olivia stood outside watching them from across the street with that same smug expression she'd worn for months. I could practically hear her thinking I was wasting my money. 3 days later, the survey report arrived. That's when everything changed. The survey revealed that a section of the driveway apron extending toward the roadway was legally part of my property. Not the city's, not the HOA's. Mine. More importantly, the exact area Olivia routinely occupied fell within the section I controlled. I must have read that report 10 times. Then I called the county office. Then I called a contractor. Then I called the property attorney for a consultation. Every conversation led to the same conclusion. If I wanted to install protective barriers on my property, I could. As long as everything complied with code requirements and permit regulations, nobody could stop me. That's when the plan came together. For nearly 3 months, Olivia had treated my property line like a suggestion. I decided to make it visible. Very visible. The contractor recommended steel bollards. Thick steel posts designed to stop vehicles. Not decorative posts. Not plastic markers. Real steel. We filed the paperwork. Pulled permits. Scheduled inspections. Followed every requirement. I wasn't interested in creating a legal gray area. I wanted everything documented, approved, an impossible challenge. Day 89 arrived on a clear Tuesday morning. At 5:30 a.m., a work truck pulled into my driveway while most of the neighborhood was still asleep. The crew unloaded equipment and began drilling into the concrete. Sparks flew. Concrete dust drifted through the air. Massive holes were cut and reinforced. Then, one by one, 6 bright yellow steel bollards were lowered into position and secured deep into the ground. By 7:45 a.m., they stood there like silent sentries, 36 inches tall, thick enough to survive a collision, painted safety yellow. You couldn't miss them if you tried. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat inside, watching the Ring camera feed. Part of me wondered whether Olivia would finally get the message. Maybe she'd see the posts and park somewhere else. Maybe she'd realize the game was over. Looking back, I underestimated the power of habit mixed with entitlement. At exactly 8:47 a.m., her Range Rover entered the camera frame. She was driving slowly, maybe 12 miles per hour. Her head was tilted downward, phone in hand. The vehicle rolled forward toward the exact spot she had occupied dozens of times before. It happened. The impact sounded like a metal dumpster getting dropped from a crane. The SUV lurched violently. The front bumper collapsed. Plastic fragments scattered across the pavement. Steam immediately erupted from beneath the hood. Coolant spilled across the concrete. Meanwhile, the bollards didn't move at all. Not a fraction of an inch. For a second, everything went quiet. Then Olivia opened the door and started screaming. She looked at the damage. She looked at the bollards. She looked at my house. Then she started marching across my lawn, shouting accusations before she even reached the front porch. "You did this on purpose," she yelled. "You set a trap." I stepped outside holding my coffee. "Those posts are bright yellow," I said. "They're impossible to miss." She kept yelling. Her face was bright red. Every sentence got louder than the one before. Then her husband appeared. He came running from their front yard like he was charging into a courtroom drama. "This is negligence," he shouted. "This is intentional property damage. You're going to pay for every dollar of this." I remember looking at him and thinking how confident he sounded. The problem was confidence isn't evidence. While he continued threatening lawsuits, I walked back inside and returned carrying a folder. 3 documents sat inside. The survey, the installation invoice, the county permit. I handed them over without saying a word. He grabbed the papers and started reading. The transformation was incredible. The anger disappeared first, then the certainty, then the threats. His voice got quieter with every page. Finally, he stopped talking entirely. For the first time since this conflict started, neither of them had anything to say. They just stood there staring at documents they should have reviewed months earlier. 2 days later, their insurance company called me. The representative explained they were investigating the collision and wanted my side of the story. I sent everything. Ring footage, survey records, permits, photographs, documentation showing months of prior incidents. 48 hours later, I received another call. Their claim had been denied. The insurance company concluded the driver had failed to maintain proper attention and had collided with a clearly visible stationary object located on legally installed private property. In simple English, she drove into a giant yellow steel post while looking at her phone. Nobody else was responsible for that decision. A few days later, I mailed something to Olivia's house. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a threat letter. It was an invoice. Every expense associated with the dispute was itemized and documented. Survey costs, legal consultation fees, installation expense, property protection improvements, everything. The total was substantial enough to get their attention immediately. That's when things became truly interesting. Her husband suddenly discovered he had a professional problem because he had already threatened me directly and inserted himself into the dispute. Representing his wife moving forward created obvious complications. So they hired outside counsel. The new attorney called me a week later. Unlike the husband, this lawyer was calm, professional, and realistic. He asked if I'd be willing to negotiate. I asked what part he wanted to negotiate. The survey? The permits? The video footage? There was a long silence on the phone. Eventually, he admitted their position wasn't strong. That might have been the understatement of the year. Over the following weeks, several settlement proposals arrived. Each one attempted to reduce responsibility or eliminate future restrictions. I rejected every version that failed to solve the actual problem. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about ending the behavior permanently. Eventually, we reached day 126. That's when the final agreement was signed. The settlement required full reimbursement for documented costs over an extended payment schedule. More importantly, it established legally recorded restrictions protecting access to my property going forward. Additional violations would trigger automatic penalties. Towing authorization was included. Everything was written, recorded, and enforceable. The dispute that began with a lazy trip to a mailbox ended with legally binding consequences. And the funniest part? Olivia already had a massive 4-car garage and a perfectly usable driveway the entire time. The solution had always been sitting right in front of her. She just believed the rules were optional until reality reminded her otherwise. After the paperwork was signed and the payment started arriving, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. No more morning confrontations. No more legal threats taped to my door. No more waiting inside my truck while someone decided whether I was allowed to leave my own property. Most mornings now, I drink my coffee by the front window before heading to work, and every once in a while I see Olivia back out of her garage, park exactly where she's supposed to, and walk to the mailbox like every other person in the neighborhood. What's interesting is that the 6 yellow bollards barely register anymore. When they first went in, they became the talk of the street. People slowed down to stare at them. Neighbors asked questions. Some thought they looked excessive. Others thought they were hilarious. But eventually they became part of the landscape. That's usually what happens with boundaries. People complain when they're first established, then later everyone forgets there was ever a conflict in the first place. Looking back, the strangest part of this entire situation is how unnecessary it was. This wasn't a complicated legal dispute involving millions of dollars. It wasn't a bitter property war stretching across decades. It was literally a woman refusing to walk an extra few seconds to collect her mail. Yet that tiny decision snowballed into months of conflict, damaged relationships, expensive legal consultations, insurance headaches, and a settlement agreement nobody would have needed if common courtesy had existed from the beginning. This is a psychological trap that shows up everywhere, not just in neighborhoods. Some people slowly convince themselves that convenience is more important than respect. Then after getting away with something repeatedly, they begin treating that privilege as a right. That's exactly what happened here. Olivia blocked my driveway so many times without consequences that she eventually stopped seeing it as my driveway at all. In her mind, it became part of her daily routine. Once that mindset takes hold, every challenge feels like an attack, even when the other person is simply asking for basic respect. From a legal perspective, this story is also a reminder that assumptions are dangerous. People love saying things like, "I know my rights," but very few people actually spend time verifying what those rights are. Her husband was a licensed attorney, yet neither of them bothered checking the property boundaries before threatening legal action. They assumed they understood the situation because they felt confident. Unfortunately, property records don't care about confidence. Surveys don't care about opinions. Documentation doesn't care who has the louder voice. According to standard procedure, evidence wins. Facts win. Records win. The person who takes the time to verify information usually wins. The lesson here is not that you should run out and install steel bollards every time a neighbor annoys you. The lesson here is that patience is often more powerful than anger. If I had exploded on day 10, I probably would have become the villain of the story. If I had damaged her vehicle or retaliated emotionally, I might have ended up facing legal problems myself. Instead, I documented everything, followed the rules, consulted professionals, and allowed the process to work exactly the way it was designed to work. That's not as satisfying in the moment as screaming across a property line, but it produces much better outcomes. There's another lesson too. Entitlement usually survives as long as nobody challenges it. The moment reality introduces consequences, the behavior often changes remarkably fast. For 89 days, Olivia believed she could inconvenience other people without repercussions. One encounter with 6 steel bollards proved otherwise. Today, those bollards are still standing exactly where they were installed. Bright yellow, perfectly visible, completely legal. And every time I drive past them, I don't think about revenge or victory. I think about how a conflict that lasted months could have been avoided by a simple decision to respect another person's space. That's really what this story was always about. Not cars, not lawyers, not steel posts. Respect. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor who acted like the rules didn't apply to them? Do you think Olivia deserved the outcome she got? Or do you think the bollards went too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'm genuinely curious where people stand on this one. And if there's one thing this entire experience taught me, it's that good fences may make good neighbors, but sometimes 6 bright yellow bollards work even better.